Amelie Ndlovu had the kind of life people dreamed about. A sparkling diamond ring, a luxury wedding at a famous Cape Town resort, and a charming groom named Tanashi who everyone said was perfect. Friends called her lucky, and her family couldn't stop smiling. But deep inside, Amelie felt something wasn't right. Every time Tanashi smiled, a strange chill ran through her. He often disappeared for business trips, answered late-night calls in secret, and changed the subject whenever she talked about their future. Still, she kept quiet, hoping her doubts were just nerves before the big day. The night before the wedding, while laughter and music filled the air, Amelie stood alone on the balcony, staring at the ocean. Her heart was heavy with questions she couldn't ignore anymore. Why did he seem distant? Why did his eyes avoid hers lately? A voice inside whispered that something was wrong. So, she made a quiet decision. As the celebration continued downstairs, she slipped her phone from her purse, turned on the voice recorder, and tucked it away. If her heart was right, she wanted proof. The night breeze brushed her wedding veil as she whispered to herself, "If there's a secret, I'll find it." Then she walked back into the party with a calm smile, dancing and laughing like every other bride-to-be. No one knew that behind that perfect smile, Amelie was preparing for the truth, a truth that would turn her fairy tale into a storm. The reception was everything Amelie had imagined: music, laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the soft glow of fairy lights reflecting on the pool. Friends toasted to love, her mother danced with joy, and Tanashi looked like the picture of a perfect groom. But even in that golden moment, Amelie's instincts wouldn't quiet down. Something about his smile still felt wrong, like a mask that might slip at any second. As the night went on, she noticed him checking his watch again and again, glancing toward the exit. Then, when he thought no one was looking, he quietly slipped away. Amelie's heart thudded in her chest. Without a word, she took off her heels and followed him down the corridor. The music faded behind her as her footsteps softened against the marble floor. She could hear her own heartbeat, loud and uneven. At the end of the hall, near the private suites, she saw a light spilling from a half-open door. Then she heard voices, low, secretive, and tense. Tanashi's voice was the first she recognized. "She believes everything," he said in a cold, controlled tone that didn't sound like the man she knew. "By morning, it's done." Before Amelie could even process those words, another voice answered, a woman's voice, smooth and teasing. "Then the inheritance will be ours," she said, followed by a soft laugh that made Amelie's stomach twist. She leaned closer, praying the floor wouldn't creak. Her mind started racing. Inheritance? Ours? What were they planning? The words cut through her like a knife. Every sweet promise Tanashi had ever made replayed in her head, the talks of forever, the gentle kisses, the vows he was supposed to make tomorrow. All of it suddenly felt like a lie. Amelie's hands trembled as she pressed herself against the wall, barely breathing. The reality of what she was hearing crashed down on her like cold water. Tanashi wasn't just lying, he was planning something much darker. She didn't know who the woman was, but her voice carried a confidence that made it clear, this wasn't a random secret. It was a plan. As she stood there frozen, she could hear the rustle of movement inside, soft laughter, and a whisper of a kiss. Her throat tightened. The world she thought she knew, the man she thought she loved, was slipping away with every word. Amelie took a shaky step back, her heart breaking but her mind slowly sharpening. She didn't cry or run. She quietly turned around and walked away, her face pale but her eyes steady. She knew she had just uncovered something that would change everything. When she returned to the reception, the music still played, and no one noticed the storm brewing behind her calm smile. Amelie sat down, lifted her glass, and whispered to herself, "By morning, it's done. We'll see about that." The night had grown quiet. The music was gone, the guests were asleep, and the laughter that once filled the halls had faded into silence. But Amelie couldn't rest. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her heart heavy and her mind replaying every word she had heard earlier. She believes everything. By morning, it's done. Those words refused to leave her. The man she was about to marry had betrayed her, and she needed to know how deep that betrayal went. At 2 a.m., she finally got up. The air was cool against her skin, and the floor felt cold under her bare feet. She slipped out of her room quietly, her wedding gown hanging by the door like a ghost of what tomorrow was supposed to be. Her phone was in her hand, camera open, her fingers trembling but steady enough to record. The resort was silent except for the sound of waves crashing faintly outside. The moonlight poured through the tall windows, lighting the hallway in soft silver. Amelie followed the faint sound of voices, each step measured, her breath slow. Her heart beat so loudly she was afraid it might give her away. Then she saw it, a dim light flickering from the direction of the honeymoon suite. Candlelight. The same suite she was supposed to walk into tomorrow as a wife. She moved closer, her back pressed against the wall, her phone camera raised. And then she heard it, laughter. Not just any laughter. His laughter. The same deep, charming laugh that used to make her feel safe. But now it carried a different sound, careless and cruel. Then came a woman's voice, soft and playful. Amelie froze. She knew that voice. It was Zanil, her cousin, the one who had helped her plan the wedding, the one she trusted like a sister. Her heart sank. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Her throat felt tight, her eyes burned, but she forced herself to stay still. The door wasn't closed all the way. She reached out with shaking fingers and pushed it open just an inch. The scene inside made her stomach twist. Tanashi was in bed, shirtless, his arm wrapped around Zanil. Candles flickered on the bedside table, their faces close, smiling, whispering words that used to belong to her. Amelie pressed record. Her hands were shaking, but she didn't stop. Every second, every laugh, every whisper, she captured it all. Tanashi's voice came through the phone's mic, low and smug. By morning, she'll never see it coming, he said. Zanil giggled and replied, then we'll finally have it all. Amelie felt her heart break completely, but her face stayed calm. She took one last look, then turned and walked away, tears streaming silently down her face. The moonlight followed her down the hall, her shadow long and lonely. She wasn't the same woman who had walked in there. She was no longer the bride in love, she was the woman who knew the truth, holding proof that would destroy them both. Amelie stood frozen outside that door, her heart breaking with every sound she heard. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone, but she didn't stop recording. Every whisper, every soft laugh, every cruel promise between Tanashi and Zanil burned into her memory. She caught the words that cut deepest, when she's out of the picture, we'll have everything. It felt like her heart was being ripped apart, but she stayed silent. No tears. No screams. Only quiet proof. She wanted the truth, and now she had it, raw, ugly, and impossible to ignore. When she finally turned away, the corridor felt endless. The candle's glow faded behind her as she walked barefoot through the cold hallway. The moonlight followed her, catching the shimmer of the tears she refused to wipe. Inside her room, the white wedding gown hung neatly by the mirror, glowing softly in the dark. She stared at it for a long moment. It looked like a dream she no longer believed in, a costume for a story that was never real. Slowly, she sat on the edge of her bed and watched the video again, forcing herself to face it all. Every time she heard Tanashi's voice, her body trembled, but her mind grew sharper. She didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window until the first light of morning touched the sky. Her reflection in the glass didn't look like a bride anymore. It looked like someone reborn, hurt, yes, but awake. The sun rose over the ocean, painting the sky gold, but her heart stayed cold and steady. She slipped into her gown with calm, careful movements, her face unreadable. The dress that once symbolized love now felt like armor. When her mother came to check on her, Amelie smiled gently. Her mother gasped a little, noticing how different her eyes looked, distant, calm, almost icy. "Are you all right, my child?" she asked softly. Amelie nodded. "I'm perfect," she said, her voice steady. "Let's have a wedding to remember." Downstairs, guests gathered again, dressed in bright colors, unaware of the storm that was about to come. They saw a bride walking toward them with quiet grace, her veil floating behind her, her smile gentle but unreadable. No one could tell that beneath that calm face was a woman who had already shattered and rebuilt herself before dawn. Amelie moved through the crowd like a ghost of her former self, every step measured, every breath a choice. The pain was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She wasn't going to beg, confront, or run. She had something stronger than revenge, the truth, and the patience to use it. As the music played and everyone celebrated love, Amelie stood tall, her heart no longer fragile. She whispered to herself, almost like a promise, "Let's have a wedding to remember." And she meant it. The morning sun rose bright over the Cape Town resort, painting everything gold and beautiful. The air was filled with excitement, laughter, and the scent of flowers. Guests gathered in their best clothes, holding phones and cameras, ready to capture what they thought would be a perfect love story. Amelie walked down the aisle slowly, her white gown glowing in the light. To everyone watching, she looked calm and graceful, the picture of a happy bride. But inside her chest, her heart was a quiet storm. She had spent the night preparing for this moment, the moment her truth would burn brighter than any wedding candle. Tanashi stood waiting for her, smiling like nothing had happened. His suit was perfect, his charm flawless. He looked at her as if they shared a secret, but Amelie knew the only secret left was his destruction. When she reached him, he took her hand, but she didn't move. His fingers trembled slightly, confused by her stillness. The priest began to speak, his voice echoing softly, asking them to share their vows. Amelie's lips curved into a small smile, but it wasn't the smile of love. It was the smile of someone who knew the end of the story before anyone else. "Before we start," she said calmly, her voice clear enough for everyone to hear, "I'd like to share something special." She reached into her gown, pulled out her phone, and connected it to the venue's sound system. For a second, people thought it was a surprise message, maybe a romantic video. Tanashi's confident grin returned, until he heard his own voice. "She believes everything. By morning, it's done." The crowd went silent. Every face turned toward him. Then came the woman's giggle, Zaniel's voice. The whispers continued. "Then the inheritance will be ours." Gasps rippled through the guests like a wave. The sound of betrayal filled the air, his voice, Zaniel's laughter, their secret plans. The joy of the wedding shattered instantly. Amelie didn't look away. She stood there, tall and still, watching him crumble. His face drained of color, his hands shaking. Zaniel, sitting among the guests, froze for a moment before covering her face. Then she bolted from her seat, running out as everyone's eyes followed her. Murmurs, gasps, and cries filled the hall. When the recording ended, there was only silence. Tanashi tried to speak, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. Amelie finally turned to him and said, her voice calm and sharp, "You thought you were marrying a fool. You were marrying your downfall." The guests stared in disbelief as Amelie took a deep breath, lifted her bouquet, and walked away, slow, steady, powerful. She didn't look back, not even once. Behind her, chaos exploded, but she was already free. By the next morning, the story had spread like wildfire. The grand Cape Town wedding that was supposed to be a celebration of love had turned into the biggest scandal of the year. Videos from the ceremony flooded every corner of social media. Guests who had recorded the moment posted them online within hours, and soon hashtags like #WeddingOfBetrayal and #AmelieSpeaks were trending across Johannesburg. Millions watched as Amelie calmly exposed her groom's lies in front of everyone. The internet couldn't get enough of her courage. Some called her the Queen of Calm Revenge. Others simply said, she did what we all wish we could. News outlets picked up the story before sunrise. Groom caught cheating night before wedding, blared across every headline. Talk shows replayed the video, analyzing every second of Amelie's reaction, the way she stood tall, the calm in her voice, and the moment she walked away without looking back. People admired her strength, her control, and the quiet power she carried. She had turned heartbreak into a lesson the whole world could see. While Amelie's name trended for strength, Tinashe's name trended for disgrace. His company's stocks plunged overnight as investors panicked. His business partners cut ties, and clients backed out of contracts. Reporters camped outside his office, shouting questions about his betrayal. Even his own family couldn't hide from the shame. What was once a respected name in business circles became a punchline in group chats and memes across the country. Zanil didn't escape either. The glamorous cousin who had smiled in every family photo now found her face splashed across gossip blogs with captions like, "The cousin who ruined a wedding." Her modeling agency dropped her within hours, claiming she had violated her moral contract. Brands she represented deleted her photos, and fans who once praised her beauty now flooded her pages with angry comments. Her glittering world of fame and followers disappeared overnight. Amelie, however, didn't post a word. She didn't give interviews, didn't respond to messages, didn't even like a single post about her. While everyone else talked, she stayed silent, walking away with her dignity, her proof, and a calmness that made her story even more powerful. People admired her not just for exposing the truth but for the way she carried herself afterward. She didn't beg for sympathy or revenge. She simply moved on. A few days later, paparazzi spotted her leaving a lawyer's office in a sleek white outfit, sunglasses on, her head held high. The photo went viral again, with one caption reading, "The bride who refused to break." Amelie had lost a man, but she had gained something far greater: self-respect, peace, and control over her story. The world couldn't stop watching, but she no longer cared about the noise. She had already won, and she didn't need a crown to prove it. Weeks passed after the scandal, but Amelie's name still lived everywhere. People thought she was done with Tinashe for good, that she had simply walked away and started over. But Amelie wasn't finished. What the world didn't know was that she had been one step ahead long before the wedding day ever arrived. She hadn't just caught him cheating, she had outplayed him at his own game. Behind her calm smile and quiet strength, Amelie had been planning something big. Months before the wedding, she had noticed small signs, secret phone calls, hidden documents, and changes in Tinashe's tone when they discussed money. While he thought she was too in love to question him, Amelie quietly started gathering her own information. She spoke to her lawyer, reviewed their engagement contracts, and uncovered that Tinashe had tied some of his business shares to their upcoming marriage. What he didn't realize was that Amelie had insisted on a few, minor, legal clauses, ones he had signed without reading carefully. Those small lines would later become the keys to his downfall. Her lawyer helped her create what she jokingly called the Phoenix Plan. It was simple but brilliant: if Tinashe ever betrayed her or tried to manipulate their finances, his assets would automatically freeze, and control would shift to her name until a court ruled otherwise. At the time, it seemed like a harmless protection clause, a what-if scenario. But when the truth about his affair came out, those legal words turned into a weapon sharper than any public scandal. By the time Tinashe realized what had happened, it was too late. The moment the video went viral and the news broke, Amelie's lawyer quietly filed the papers that triggered the clause. His bank accounts were locked, his access to company funds restricted, and the joint shares he had hoped to use as leverage were legally transferred to Amelie. He couldn't touch a cent without her approval. The media didn't know this part yet, but whispers started to spread in business circles. People began saying that the heartbroken bride was not just a victim, she was a strategist who had outsmarted a millionaire. The story turned from pity to awe. Reporters who once described her as betrayed now called her brilliant. Amelie didn't brag. She didn't need to. While Tanashi scrambled to fix his ruined reputation, she quietly signed new papers in her lawyer's office, securing her control and ensuring that every move he made would go through her. When asked how she felt about everything, she simply smiled and said, "I don't chase revenge. I prepare for it." The truth was simple, Tanashi thought he was marrying a naive woman he could deceive. But Amelie had already written her own ending. Like a phoenix, she had burned in the fire he set, and risen from it brighter than ever. Months later, the chaos had finally faded. The headlines had moved on, the gossip had quieted, and Amelie had built a new life far from the noise. She stood on the balcony of her new oceanfront apartment, the waves crashing softly below, the salty wind brushing against her skin. The sun was setting, painting the sky in gold and pink, and for the first time in a long while, she felt peace. The world that once saw her as a broken bride now saw her as something far stronger, a woman who rebuilt herself from the ashes. Inside, her home was calm and elegant, filled with light and quiet strength, a reflection of who she had become. She poured herself a cup of tea, glanced at her reflection in the glass door, and smiled. The woman looking back at her wasn't the same one who once cried over a man's lies. She was wiser, freer, and in full control of her story. Softly, she whispered to her reflection, "I followed you once, but now, no one leads my story but me." Just then, her phone buzzed. It was an email from a global women's empowerment foundation. The message read, "Your story has inspired millions. We'd love for you to speak at our international summit." Amelie stared at the words, her eyes filling with quiet pride. She realized her pain had turned into something powerful, a voice that could help others find their strength too. She stepped back onto the balcony, the sea breeze lifting her hair. She smiled toward the horizon, her heart light. The girl who once followed in silence now walked ahead with confidence, leaving the ghosts of 2 a.m. behind forever.